Hello, my name's Suzanne and I'm an actor, teacher and storyteller. And in these days towards the end of isolation, I have some stories to tell you. The emphasis is towards adult storytelling, but the first story is for any age group really. I started my storytelling off at Wonderwings, the fairy shop in Richmond. This is a very long time ago now. It's a very long time ago now. But I used to go in on Friday nights and there'd be groups of adults celebrating something, and we'd have some champagne and some fairy cakes and fairy tales, traditional tales, stories of wisdom. Anyway, my first story is about an ant. And this ant had a stroke of really good luck. He found a very big crumb. Not only that, but the crumb had a great big dollop of grape jelly on it. Oh, the ant couldn't wait to get that crumb back to the anthill because he knew all the ants in the anthill would be delighted with a taste of that crumb. So he started to push and push and push and push. But the crumb was very heavy and it was very hard for him to push. And he thought he really needed some help. And just then a bee was flying along overhead. Bee, could you please help me with this heavy crumb? Bzzz, bzzz, bzzz. I'm sorry, I'm too busy with all this pollen I have on my legs. I have to get it back to the beehive. Bzzz. Oh, and the ant started to push again, fussing and fuming, and along came a beetle, a trickster beetle. Beetle, please help me with this heavy crumb. All right, I'm happy to help, said the beetle, and he took a great big bite of the crumb and sauntered off. Oh, I helped you, didn't I? Oh, I can't. But the ant did keep trying, pushing and pushing. Oh, I can't. Well, Spider, who lived in the tree above, had been watching all of this, and she spun her silken web down to Ant, and she said, Ant, I've been listening to you with all your I can'ts. I've got a good mind to wrap that crumb up and take it home to my children. Oh, no, you can't do that, said Ant. And he pushed and he pulled and he pushed and in no time at all, he had the crumb at the opening of the anthill. And he turned around and looked at Spider. And she gave him a big wink and she said, See, I knew you could. You can do a lot more than you think you can. And that goes for you too. It goes for all of us. We can do a lot more than we think we can. Now, my second story is about a young woman, and it comes from this book. I'm the person who buys all the books, all the old books from the libraries when they're no longer in circulation, particularly the old traditional tale books and the fairy tale books. And I don't buy all of them, but I do have a large collection from many libraries. This one came from Bendigo. I've got ones from Stonington and all over the place, actually. Anyway, this story is about a young woman who's married, who lives in the mountains, the high mountains of Ethiopia, and she's married to a rich farmer, and he bestows on her beautiful dresses and lovely jewels, glistening jewels, but sadly he started to neglect her, and the woman is very lonely because sometimes he goes away for weeks at a time, and she finally goes to visit the village wise man and to ask him for some charms. And he pulls his cape around his shoulders and he prepares to listen to her. And she explains she seems to have lost her husband's affection, and could he please give her a charm to help her win it back? And he strokes his beard, and he speaks to her in a kind voice, and he says yes, he could give her a charm or two, but first she would need to bring him 3 hairs from a live lion's mane. A very daunting task indeed, and the young woman lies awake at night, listening to the lion in the ravine behind the farm. Finally, she resolves to do something about this. She gets up very early one morning and goes down and finds a little lamb where all the lambs are, where all the sheep have been lambing. And she picks up her favorite lamb and she puts it under her arm and she goes right down to the ravine and she goes as close to the lion as she can bring herself to go. And she puts the lamb down and she turns around and walks back up to the farmhouse. Well, every morning at the same time, she takes an offering of food to the lion with the big black mane. And after a while, the lion starts to trust her. And eventually, the lion starts to come to her and rub his big mane against her side. And he swishes his tail. And she can search in his mane for any burrs or any seeds and clean it out a bit for him. And he purrs. So she knows she has the trust of the lion. And she takes 3 hairs from his mane. And she goes back to the wise man. And she says, "Here, I have the hairs from the lion's mane." And the wise man pulls his white cape around his head to keep it warm from the cold that comes from the snow on the mountains. And he prepares to listen. And he says, "And how did you achieve this?" And she says, "Well, I hid my fear and I used my patience and my affection and I used my understanding and I have the hairs." And the wise man said, "Well, these are the gifts I have to give. You must use your patience, your affection, and your fine understanding, and you will win back the affection of your husband." So, I think that's a very strong story. I hope that leaves you with something to think about. Thank you